So we plead for an interactive way of making urbanism and architecture. So it means basically that the dialogue with users and with stakeholders is very important. And we try to visualize what people think and what they need in that way, and mix that and put that into this blender, you can say. There's more than only the stakeholders and the users. There's also the more general observations. How do we contribute to the planet, to the climate change? That comes also into that kind of tools, into this dialogue. And we try to visualize it as clear as possible. Sometimes there's an overlap, and then that strengthens the direction. Sometimes there's a dispute, and that it can lead to different ways. So who wins is then a question in that way. There are, in urbanism, say, simpler tools to show that. The paradoxes are part of our environment, so sometimes they can cohabit, the paradoxes. I think it's beautiful to show that they overlap or not, so to literally build the optimum of everything out of that. And say where it contradicts, to show it and to solve it on the spot. That is one way of say, making these contradictions possible. A second way is that's what we simulate in the Y Factory, is gaming to solve this. And it was nice to compare different, say, games as such, games attitudes. The blind game was actually had the highest satisfaction level. Why? Because you don't know what the other is doing, and you react, and you have to do that in, say, a limited amount of time. Say 20 minutes, you have to come to a conclusion. That I find that for me was an eye-opener, to see that the blind gaming, in a way, is actually maybe an advice to do that. We started with that already a long time ago, with the shapes of datascapes that are showing that potential, that are based on these parameters. So this parameterization helps on one hand to reveal complexity. On the other hand, it's also a tool to engage people in it, because its statistics are helping to create choices. Already for 20 years now, after datascapes, I do it now also with predicting, to say what can the future be based on scenario thinking, based on these logics. That can be complexer, so that helps also to fantasize on the future. Even if you think that we have in the future maybe other kind of material, then I can imagine by this kind of parameterization how material will react on me. So I can already model the interaction of this future material. It's almost the most advanced, say, way of dealing with an interactive environment, say, a parameterized environment. And I'm happy that we now start two processes on this way. But we collaborate sometimes also with the university in that way. And for instance, that a group in Delft hacked Google Maps, basically, to get information from, you call it data absorbing and data mining, and use that for the design for our buildings, to evaluate greenery. So you can do an analysis basically of the city, where are the weaknesses based on that. So that kind of stuff we are trying to do. In 2019, so a year ago, I made 1 year with observations by Domus, the magazine that I ran as a guest editor, and I dedicated to a plea that says that everything is urbanism. And then we explored the power of architecture, what it contributes to the bigger agenda. We explored the big scale, the XL scale, what can you do with the planet as an object. And we explored also the smaller elements, say new technology that would change cities and change our planet as such. And that leads to a range of participants that is city making these days. So when I say to to a toilet maker, for instance, and he or she makes better toilets, and we can do millions of those toilets, then my city becomes better. My sewage system becomes better, I make cleaner environments, and with that. So that says something that one small element can do a lot in this case. If I look to architecture, that it has the same kind of potential. What does a building do on the large scale? I can make a small element, don't worry. I can make a small house, it's beautiful. What it says is that small is beautiful. That we need more smaller entities in that way. That could be a message in China, that now mass production is going on of housing, that actually the fact that you make a rich tapestry of small, cute, beautiful, everyone is different house would give a comment on your current situation and contribute it in another way. I like Beijing, but I have also some connotations. I like Beijing because you can bike, because it's kind of flat. I like Beijing because it has hutongs, not too many anymore in that way. And I like Beijing because of its climate. It's hot and very cold. Especially I like it when it's in the winter. This is somehow my favorite time, always in Beijing. I think it's very good that the air became better. In that way. I love Beijing also when you can see the mountains. I find Beijing sometimes also a bit complicated because it's so governmental, so strict, I guess, or so a bit unclear in its what it wants to do, in its considerate elaboration of freedom and of diversity. That is hard to understand. I think I love Beijing because of the relationship with the mountains. So I think that could be strengthened in the future. Yeah, because that's unique on the planet. When you fly and then you go down and you go over the mountain, and there's Beijing. So that's super important in the metropolitan area to somehow to develop, to see what it could be. I miss the mountains in the plan. To say how to make a city on the edge of such a kind of vast territory of mountains, that is on the foot of the mountains, that feeling could be, what would that mean? Could we enlarge the fresh air from there? Can we make more forestry that's connected to that? Can we use it to introduce that landscape with perspectives, with views, with building around the views, etc. So for me that part is a bit missing yet, as far as I know. Maybe I miss it in the communication. So that is where my heart would be. What are two elements of biennales in general which I like? One, you show the state of the art. So a curator has the potential to invite young and different architects, in this case like artists, to show their things. How to combine something like that with, say, the message that you would like to develop every 2 years, and to curate also what are the big themes of the time. In general, I appreciate that a biennale is given to a curator that can develop that theme and that can put, say, a markstone on say the future that is needed in terms of architecture and urbanism or landscape architecture as such. I also think that's very important to stress that this can be done by one person and the curatorial team, to create that liberty to imagine that every time another voice can do that with all its means, because that creates surprises, that creates also like a combination of research and a very personal touch by this curator, who can, with her and his, say, sharpness and background, can create an angle on which we can observe the planet, or can observe the state of the art of architecture and urbanism. So that's an advice that I would give, to create over time the different, say, biennales as such. That's different than the Shenzhen Biennale. The Shenzhen Biennale is very much about urbanism, and which is good, and every time a statement on urbanism. is now developed over the last years, and which is very helpful also for the city of Shenzhen. It's very specific for Shenzhen. And Beijing, for me, is not yet clear what kind of task it will give itself. Is it an urbanistic task? Is it a cultural task? And that's why I say that then the liberty of people come into the perspective, or has it another kind of task? So I pose the question back. We know that there are many biennales in the world, and what can you do in that term and I'm happy to discuss that and to see what is the best.